And good afternoon, everybody. Hello, welcome to Talk Recovery Radio. You're either watching us on Facebook or you're listening to us on the radio, 100.5 FM, Vancouver Co-op Radio. Although we're 1 week behind because there's this thing called COVID going on and the radio station's closed. So Darren and I are broadcasting from home. I'm from the office. 7 years of shows, hundreds of guests, thousands of listeners. Thank you, everybody. Hello, Mr. Darren Gaylor. How are you?
I'm pretty good. It was a little bit of a quiet intro on my end. I didn't hear anything. I just saw the video.
Oh, really? So, oh, yeah. I don't know. I hope I played the video right. And if I didn't, my apologies. But there was a good soundtrack in the background.
Somebody was introducing us.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, damn! I forgot to hear share audio. You know, I want to go back to the studio. I'm just missing that.
It's the problems from working at home.
Exactly. Yes, working from home. We got 2 guests on the air today, so we're excited for that. And we'll be bringing on our second guest at 12:30. But before we get into our first guest, go to Recovery Day BC's Facebook page, and you're going to see an article by Daphne Bram talking about the science coming out of the downtown east side and housing first, and how Vancouver did not fulfill its commitment on the Housing First projects, on creating recovery-oriented systems of care, not just housing, roofs, and needles and safe supply. It was promised to be much more than that. They use this term wraparound services, but there's just none. They're not existing. And, there's a small little research institute called SFU, which is like one of Canada's biggest research institutes, universities. And Darren, they've got so much data showing like housing first is causing harm.
Yeah, it's frustrating. It's a constantly frustrating topic. It's nice to see now some published articles and stories of the truth about what's not working, the stats, the numbers, the costs. It's not working. Like any of like our mop heads that support the safe supply, like it's at such a far end of so many already failed attempts. Yeah. And so if you think that supporting that or that's a good idea, then you're ignorant to all the failed systems and policies that have already taken place and put us in this position, and it's sad, man, because these are people that
getting hurt.
Don't need more dope. The numbers and the deaths are just going up and up and up. So
I just don't understand why people aren't held accountable. Like, they say they're going to launch this project, Housing First. It's going to be all this stuff, and everyone's like, that's a great idea. And I don't know, like, no hate mail, please. Are we lazy? Like, are we lazy? Is that what it is? Like, it's just, let's just give them a roof. I mean, all this other stuff, like, that's a lot of work, like that motivational interviewing, that's a lot of work. Like all this other stuff, like, I just don't get it. Like, how can anybody with half a brain sit there and wake up today and be like, yeah, this is working. Like, Housing First is working. Like, that research paper that SFU did, that's just nonsense. None of that's real. I mean, it's working, and it's not. And it's like, follow the evidence, but only if the evidence suits your narrative. And that hopefully one day will show, like, the last 20 years of the 4 pillars approach in Vancouver is definitely one of Canada's not the worst, but definitely one of the worst tragedies we've done on marginalized individuals. It's just criminal.
Because of the lack of the 3rd and 4th pillar. Like, I mean, currently we have this system of the first 2 pillars and now decrim, and it's like, what is that?
People
What
are getting
approach is that?
awards for like creating the 4 pillars, like standing ovations for creating a 4-pillar approach. Like you can Google it, awards for 4 pillars approach. It's absolutely insane. People
It's
are
bananas.
applauding each other for creating this approach. And it's not even working. And it's like, oh, thank you for creating this. Looks great on paper, but you know what? Like being in psychosis behind a door under a roof paid for by the government and no opportunity to get treatment on demand if you ask for it is wrong. And any politician, healthcare provider that's okay with that, it's wrong. And sitting, you know, in a photo with a bunch of blankets on the ground, calling that housing with pride. Look at these blankets on the ground. That's wrong. Putting people in little tiny boxes and calling it housing is wrong. We did it calling it the projects in the 80s, and we're just doing it now, but we're smaller, like little boxes. So anyway, that's our rant for today. Read Daphne Bram's article. It just tells the truth about what's going on in the downtown east side, and it's not against anything. It's just saying we haven't done the whole what was promised. So yeah, go to our Facebook page. Darren, who are we talking with recovery today for the first half of our show?
Yeah, we have a returning guest today. We get to talk recovery with Darlene Lancer, who's appearing now.
Hi.
Hello, Darlene.
Hello
Hi.
there. Nice
Welcome back to our show.
Okay.
We spoke with you a few years ago. I think it was on the topic of the 10 Steps to Self-Esteem, one of your 14 or so books. And today we're gonna talk a little bit about conquering shame and codependency, 8 steps to freeing the true you. This is not a brand new book, but it's gonna be outlined in you know, this day and age of the pandemic. I'm sure it's gonna have more use with the troubles. I mean, you know, there's reports domestic abuse is up on you know, the really, you know, awful end of the spectrum, and the other end of the spectrum, it's just, you know, couples spending a little bit more time together, not really working, you know, therapeutically together, let's say. What is it in this current climate, the pandemic, that's creating a little bit more need for, you know, codependency awareness?
That's a good question. Yeah.
Well, you know, we're just watching this live, you know, the different virtual backgrounds. I think we got a good one right now. We're doing
like the green? Okay.
Yeah, we're doing Zoom live right now, and then the show gets rebroadcast on the radio. Just because of COVID right now, the studio is closed. But yeah, that's a great question, Darren.
Yep. And it's a lot of factors. So
yeah.
So what time are we going to start?
Oh, we're started, Darlene. Yeah, we're live. Yeah, I was wondering. I'm like, does she? Yeah, no, we're live. Yeah. There was a whole intro done already, and
all right.
Yeah.
Everybody sees my background.
Yeah,
that's great.
Okay.
Yeah, just a little touch on that. Like, what have you noticed?
Okay. I thought we were going to get ready to start. Okay. So first of all, there's, you know, I just posted something on there's increased domestic violence, and people can't get away from each other. That's a big reason. So a lot of problems in relationships start to surface.
Right.
And people can't, I mean, codependents have a hard time asking for space as it is. But maybe you have a home where you don't have much space, and then you have kids that are out of school and they're there. So there's increased conflict and tension, irritability, and people tend to take it out on the person closest to them.
That pretty much.
Conscious, you know, that it's their own issue.
Yeah.
And so they start pointing the finger and blaming. And then if people are out of work or they're worried about finances, it could bring up shame. Also, if their kids aren't doing their homework on Zoom or whatever, that can make parents feel shamed, comparing themselves, their parenting to other parents, or the kids acting out. They start to think that they're not a good enough parent. And then they take it out on the kids, they take it out on each other. And certainly if you're unable to provide for your family, that's a reason for feeling ashamed too, particularly for men. But if you're a single mother, that's a big problem.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just so many factors of just added stress that, potentially we didn't see coming. I can relate to the shame aspect with having a young kid. He's almost 3, so he's not in school yet. And there was, I'm a stay-at-home dad, and so with my 5-year-old, when he was 2, 3, there was just community resources, little rec centers galore. Everything's open. There was never a lack of activity for him. And now, after I drop that 5-year-old off at school, I walk back home with my 3-year-old, and I'm like, I don't know what to do for you. Like, I just feel so bad that he doesn't have that same. And I mean, do I feel shame? Like, I guess it's my responsibility. So there is an aspect of guilt, a little bit in there. And I mean, I'm pretty well aware of this, so I think I'm on top of it. But I could just imagine what's coming up for people that aren't working on themselves, that aren't, really too self-aware. And what is the major like defects or behaviors of people, the most common ones that people act in when dealing with stress and when shame and guilt comes up? Like, what do people typically do? Is it control?
You get more anxiety, for sure, and irritability when you have stress. Couples start arguing about who's, doing more parenting, and the kids have, like you said, they're full of energy. And if they can't play with their friends and they can't run around outside or on a playground, they're going to be causing, ruckus at home. Maybe if you have more than one child, they're going to be fighting probably. So, but when people start feeling anxious and irritable, they usually start pointing the finger at one another. And when people have shame, there's usually a couple reactions: aggression or withdrawal. And this is what causes the biggest conflicts in couples. More often men tend to be more aggressive and women withdraw, but that's not universal. Of course, women are aggressive too. And so people will blame themselves. They'll attack or blame their partner. And then their spouse is going to might attack back. And then you just have, an explosion that just gets worse. But more often, the one partner withdraws and then puts up walls, and then the aggressive partner maybe got over it, and then they feel abandoned, and then it just spirals out of control, rather than just sharing their feelings of stress, worry, their fears about their finances, their children, their future, their profession. And
so that deflation, that someone can become aware of, to like, I'm too angry, I'm saying all the wrong things to someone I love. Like, it takes a little bit of self-awareness to identify that, to come down and say, hey, look, like, that's really not what I meant. Let's get into, sharing what's really going on. What can people do to allow for that awareness? Can somebody who's never, read a self-help book or seen a therapist, like, can they do that on their own?
The first thing is, like, you hear yourself. So what you're talking about is an aware ego, or like a witness state. So part of you is seeing yourself, and you develop that in therapy. You develop it maybe in doing 12 steps program, you develop that by mindful meditation. So just meditating, or just, when you start to feel your pulse rising, feel hot, or signs of anger, irritability, your muscles tense, start listening to your body, and then just take a break. You can go do some writing, talk to a friend, take a walk until you calm down a little bit, and just the biggest obstacles that people start judging themselves. I think, oh, well, I'm getting angry again, or I'm getting anxious again. Instead of doing that, get curious. Like curious about, okay, well, what just happened? And what got triggered? And what was I thinking? What were my beliefs under that? And how can I get my needs met? So you're not going to get your needs met from your spouse by blaming or attacking. You're going to do much better by just asking for what you need or want in a calm, loving voice and listening to them. People's relationship with themselves is quite often a template for the relationship with others. So if you're allowing, accepting of yourself and compassionate with yourself, you'll be more that way with others. And you won't allow other people to abuse it either, because it'll feel so unfamiliar based on how you yourself.
And on that note, your book, The 8 Steps, is that a way to do writing exercises to get to a place where you can be that person that is accepting of yourself and so forth? Like, what happens when somebody reads this book?
A lot of people have said it's been a real eye-opener and transformative and comforting too, because they see how prevalent shame is. They thought it was only them. That's the most profound and painful feeling of shame. It's like it's personal. That's why it's called narcissistic shame. It has nothing to do with narcissism, but it feels like you're the only one that's experiencing that. You're the only one that's feeling embarrassed and exposed, and the world is judging you, and you're not human. You're like an alien, and other people are normal. And so they read the book and they realize, oh, this is so common. That's the first thing. And then a third of the book is exercises and helping you recognize when you go into what's called a shame spiral. So you start having a reaction to something. It might be someone else's comment. It might be your own thoughts. And then you start repeating it, and you go deeper into what I call the well of shame. And then you start beating yourself up. You start getting depressed, and pretty soon you feel hopeless and empty. And this can go on for days and days. A lot of times people come into therapy and they say, oh, I'm just really down, or I'm in a mood. And then we trace it back to something that happened. Maybe someone didn't return a phone call, or they said something that they're judging, or someone said something to them. They didn't do well on some review at work, and they don't even realize that they've been beating themselves up about it for days. So if you expect perfection of yourself, that's a problem. So the book goes through a lot of exercises to help you build that aware ego, to identify your inner critic. And I also have an ebook. You mentioned it, 10 Steps of Self-Esteem.
Yeah.
How to stop self-criticism. A lot of that's incorporated in Conquering Shame. And to examine your beliefs.
Yeah, I was going to say, how you were describing, the shame cycle and the thoughts and the reactions. I mean, that just sounds like someone dealing with regular shame, but with very little self-esteem. And it sounds like that's sort of the foundation, to develop one's self-esteem, because there's no way around not feeling shame.
Yes, it's a normal emotion, right?
Right. So it's all these inappropriate expressions of shame that, cause all this damage in relationships and this, the way you're describing, like, imagine going the rest of our lives with such, taking things on so personally.
Right.
I do it. I'm not perfect, but I'm aware enough to know that, like, something's off. My esteem's off. I walked into this room, with a negative thought already, and it was a setup.
Right.
So
yeah.
yeah. So get on the self-esteem book as well. Maybe do those 10 steps, then the 8 steps.
Well, that's the beginning. And then, okay, some people are very aware of their shame and they feel it all the time. And you can see it. You see by a person's posture, they're kind of withdrawn. If you go to a meeting or something, they kind of hang out in the back and they don't talk to anyone.
Yeah.
People pick that up. And then other people, they can be quite successful and they have no idea that they have shame underneath until something happens. And then suddenly they get this shame attack. So there's different types of it. But as you said, it's a normal emotion and you want to just, not have it ruin your day. I mean, just like having everybody see me play with the backgrounds, that probably, when you told me that, like, I'm sure some years ago I would have been mortified. Not been able to continue my conversation.
And, even we had a glitch at the beginning of the show with our audio, and like it would have been the same thing. Oh my God, I'm a failure. Now it's like, whatever, I'll edit it out later. Who cares? There's bigger things to talk about. I have a question for you. So we have a lot of viewers. This is powered by New West Recovery, and I work in a treatment center. And that's the background here. It's a men's program. Lots of these men have wives. And there's something happens when, the wife, that sends the husband to rehab, the husband's in rehab, and then it's like, okay, now it's time for you to get some help. And, codependency gets talked about and so forth. And the wife's like, he's the one in rehab, right? And, it's kind of like, nope, he's broken, not me. What do you say about that? Like, what do you have to say? Pardon?
I totally identify, because when I was in the Al-Anon meeting, I thought, why am I here? I'm not the problem.
Yeah.
So I would suggest to those husbands to tell their wives it would help him recover. And not point the finger, there's just something wrong, because probably he's done as a lot to make amends for.
Yeah.
And she's waiting to hear that. So
a show of support.
It would really help me with my sobriety, my abstinence, if you could, be on this journey with me to understand what I'm going through. And she'll probably be all on board to help him.
Yeah, great
good
advice.
point. Yeah, good point. Yeah, a little trick there. Help him, but you help yourself in the end.
Yeah, I want to bring up something else, and that self-esteem is how we think about ourselves, and shame is really more of a feeling, how we feel about ourselves. And we can work. It's great to be working with, your thoughts, but sometimes people have deep trauma underneath, and so part of full recovery is accessing the trauma and knowing how it shapes your reactions, and that you don't have to react to a situation in the present like you did when you were 5 years old. Right. So sometimes just revealing that and talking about it and having compassion for that child, you realize you don't have to be afraid of someone who has a loud voice, because now you're an adult. Now you can speak up, or you don't have to be afraid of certain trigger words that maybe your parent said to you. That's not happening. So recovery is like really being in present time, being present and not reacting from the past, your past programming. And then you have tremendous more freedom. So the book goes into your past trauma too. And what's underneath addiction and shame is emptiness. And that's not much written about or talked about. But I have a whole chapter on that being and learning to just be with that feeling of nothingness and emptiness, because we try so hard to fill it up with activities and work and drugs and other people, but we can't escape it from ourselves. So the best way through is just befriending it. And then that can really turn into a state of bliss that the Buddhists, and the spiritualists write about. It's just being in that empty state without feeling like something is missing in your gut.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I mean, that's the hope. I mean, the idea that the worst lessons we learn, the worst behaviors we have, the worst perspectives that we developed can all be worked on, can all be, not, I mean, not necessarily fixed, but you know, it doesn't have to be that way. You know, and we talked about like self-esteem, you know, that being such a huge foundation. What is it though that the individual needs first? Okay, so I watched a show last night, and this little clip, it's sort of on the line of what Giuseppe was talking about. The man was driving his wife addicted to fentanyl through prescription, and he was dropping her off at treatment. And he looks over and he says, "Honey, I'm so proud that you're doing this for, you know, that you're here and that you're doing this for yourself." And she looked over and she said, "I'm not doing this for me. I'm being forced by you for yourself." And I was just like, how many, like, you know, relationships have come to that point where that one of them is not ready, willing, desired, you know, I'm doing, is that codependency? Is there any way around that? Like when somebody is so sick, you know, what does that partner do?
Well, it's a combination of detaching and knowing it's not about you and that you can't control, you know, addiction or illness. But you can also set boundaries. You could make it and stop enabling, first of all. So not supporting the addiction, not engaging in trying to fix the other person, rescue them, solve their problems, call their boss, give them money, you know, all kinds of things. But little by little, you can set boundaries like, I'm not going to drive with you. I'm not going to engage in conversation with you when you're intoxicated. And if they're acting out, you might leave the room. And at some point, you might want to say, I always say when you set boundaries, you know, there has to be consequences for them to work.
Yeah.
But don't set a boundary. They say in Al-Anon too, don't create a crisis. Don't set a boundary that you're not willing to carry out, because then it undermines your position. If you don't, you become the boy that cried wolf. So if you say, if you don't stop drinking, I'm divorcing you, and then you don't, what have you done? You've just proven that your word doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And so addicts don't believe your actions. You know, their partners tend to believe the words of the addict who says, this is my last drink, you know, or whatever. They believe the words. The addict won't really pay attention until there's an action.
Yeah.
So
it's so difficult to right answer that situation, you know. With somebody that's in addiction, their choices are going to be booze, alcohol, pills, like sometimes, a lot of the times before the relationship. And then being given that option, it's like, well, in my sick head, I'm going to keep using. Do you know what I mean? And then how much, you know, regret later on if they ever look back and say, wow, that was the wrong choice. But is it that, can it be that forceful in the beginning where it's change or I'm leaving, like change or we're done? You know what I mean?
First of all, I would do it in a loving way.
Okay.
The way you said it is like aggressive.
Yeah.
So it's like, I love you so much and I want this relationship so much. I want us to grow old together, you know, raise our kids, whatever it is. And I'm worried about you. You share your honest feelings. I really, it makes me anxious. I worry. I miss the closeness with you. Maybe, you know, I've missed sex with you if that's been missing. And I could see a really happy future together. And it's always important if your partner has made changes in the past that you remind them of. So you say, you know, I know you were able to quit smoking, or you had so many fears about doing this work and then you changed it, or, you know, last year you were sober for 2 months. I know you can do it. So you give them encouragement and support. They need that, you know. And
that sounds way better than
yeah.
change or I'm leaving.
And by the way, I love you either way, but I can't keep, it's just like so painful for me and it's so unhealthy that I can't, it's too painful to watch me see you slowly destroy yourself.
Yeah.
That's the real pain of a partner. And that's the reason that they try to fix and go into denial, is because it's very painful seeing someone be self-destructive.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's devastating.
sometimes, you know, I've been in AA meetings where a speaker said he had been suicidal. And he said, if my wife rescued me one more time, I wouldn't be alive today to share with her. Right. And by the way, a lot of people are forced to AA because of a court order or your example. But then after they keep going and then it sticks and they find out they feel better.
Yeah, try to throw whatever you can at it and hopefully something sticks. There's many pathways, so why not try all of them and find out which one works for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so with this pandemic and Zoom, I mean, if I was looking for a therapist, you know, a marriage counselor, you know, I'd look in my neighborhood, right? So now, you know, somebody watching the show right now, can they see you through Zoom?
Yes. Well, I work by phone usually, but I consult with people all over the world.
Okay.
And so my website is whatiscodependency.com. And they can always reach me there with my email, my phone number, everything.
And I gotta say, so much resource on your website, like blogs, so many topics. I mean, the information you could literally spend hours, and that's sort of the beginning for so many, is just to get on, educate yourself, find out what resources are out there. And Darlene Lancer, thank you very much for coming on the show again.
Thank you.
We'll have you on real soon.
Great. Thank you very much for the invite.
Thanks, Darlene. And you can go to our Facebook page to find links to Darlene's website and all of her awesome books. Take care, Darlene. See you again soon.
Bye-bye.
And you're listening to Talk Recovery Radio, either on the radio or here on Facebook Live. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Don't forget, we're all over iTunes, Spotify, and so forth. And we're not in the studio because of COVID. And we've got 2 more guests coming on the show right now. They are the Street Saviors Outreach team. We've got Bobby and Ben. Hello, Bobby. Hello, Ben.
Hey, how's it going?
Awesome. Ben, we got audio? Perfect. Great. Welcome to the show. You know, I've been following your group on Facebook and so forth, and so much here, personal stories, obviously. So why don't we just start off with what is Street Saviors Outreach Society?
Well, to speak to that, so Street Saviors, or SSOS, it's it's sort of like a grassroots, secular, all volunteer nonprofit that sort of emerged out of Ryan, our founder, and a number of other people who were sort of in recovery themselves, and you know, sort of in the first couple of years of the when the fentanyl crisis really started to sort of kick in, I remember, like, there's a conversation that I was having with them on Facebook just in regards to how often, you know, we found ourselves in situations, you know, in the life where we would have to, you know, respond to an overdose, or one of our friends would overdose, and so on. And he was looking sort of for some type of service worker, you know, as part of this kind of recovery picture to do. And so he got the idea when he was in this recovery house of just making a bunch of sandwiches and getting an naloxone kit, and just the very basic first aid training that he had at the time. And with a group of guys heading down to the downtown east side and walking around the streets and alleys. And at the time, it was like it was you know, getting approval from the house manager to go and hang out in the downtown east side when you're in early recovery. Yeah. It was a tough sell. And I remember when he actually called me with the idea. Like, at that time, I was still, you know, in active addiction, right? And I mean, it sounded like a great idea, but I was like, you know, I got bigger problems right this second. But over the years, I'd sort of seen it on Facebook. I'd seen it sort of flourish and everything that it's become, and now it's you know, it's a pretty eclectic mix of really just amazing human beings, people who are either in recovery or whose lives have been sort of connected to or touched by the community, or by addiction, as well as people who are in various programs for or in the process of becoming or have become first responders of various stripes. So fire, paramedics, even occasionally law enforcement students. What will happen is they'll come, they want to get some real world experience and give back, and so they'll come to volunteer with us, thinking maybe initially that they might come out a few times and whatnot and put it on the resume, but it is very much a balance. For me
So
personally,
it's a volunteer group of individuals. I see some photos. You're in high vis vest, those orange high vis vests. And so, Ben, do you walk around the downtown east side and naloxone people? Have you naloxone people?
Yeah. So, I mean, the name is Street Saviors Outreach Society. So the emphasis is definitely on the outreach side of things rather than wanting to be a bunch of first aiders running around jabbing people with Narcan. So it started off with Ryan, he started bringing sandwiches out, and that's something we still do. We get donations of bread every week from Cobb's Bakery. So we'll have bins and bins of bread. We meet at our office around like 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock usually, and volunteers will make several backpacks full of Nutella sandwiches. We source candy and juice boxes, water, that kind of thing. So we'll split up into teams, usually like 3, 4, 5 people per team, and walk around handing out sandwiches, candy. We also have harm reduction supplies, so clean rigs, pipes, foil, that kind of thing, as well as naloxone.
Are you in recovery yourself?
I'm not, no.
Oh no, Bobby, are you? You're in recovery.
Yes.
Do you get triggered being around that environment?
Right, and that was a concern, right off the bat, because I've spent like some years in the downtown east side, and I thought initially, so when I first went into recovery a little over 2 years ago, I gave it a few months, and I didn't want to go right down there, the first few weeks.
Yeah.
But it was definitely kind of on my to-do, because I had run into, I had both, I remember the conversations that was its inception, but I also had run into them down there, and it just seemed like such a, admirable thing, and the people doing it seemed to be having such a great time and finding like such connection out of it. But in terms of being triggered, like, I guess you would have to be reasonably secure in your recovery. Then again, for a lot of people, like their kind of trigger zone might be like a club or a rave or something like that, and the kind of using that you would see in the downtown east side, which tends to be a fair bit more sort of destitute, may not be as big of a trigger in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
But really, I mean, when you have the vest on and when you're with the team, like you're not, even when I run into friends that maybe I've used with in the past, that draw, it doesn't call to you so much the same way, because you're kind of more into the mentality of like kind of trying to help people, right? And I mean, there's people down there who are still down there who I very much care about, who are great people, and it's one way that I can still kind of in some kind of peripheral way kind of be connected with them, but like in a safe and like non-toxic way to myself, and also kind of maybe, and not to self-aggrandize or anything, but also maybe to kind of subtly kind of demonstrate, like, hey, if I can do this, like, I thought I was a lifer. I spent 15 years in active addiction, like, so if I could do it, like, you can too. And we've had friends, we've had a guy who I brought back from an overdose like a couple years later, walk in the door and join up, and now he's one of our team leads. So there's that kind of that element of like going and looking for the next guy, right? Like
so have that for volunteers. I mean, they have to have some sort of reason, and something in their heart to go down there. And so for somebody who's come out of there, they have that to show somebody. But Ben, if having not been in recovery, like what was your connection? What was your reasoning to volunteer and get behind this?
Oh, well, I mean, there's a lot to it, I think, but how I originally got involved was I was taking a wilderness first responder course, and one of the paramedics that was teaching the class is just a first aid course. And one of the paramedic instructors had interactions, had street saviors hand off patients and stuff to him while he was working in the downtown east side. And he mentioned it as like a potential way to sort of put the first aid skills to use. So I sent Bobby an email, like this was a couple of years ago, and was like, hey, can I come out and volunteer? And I think once I got involved, it was, I don't know, I just immediately kind of saw it as a good way to sort of be engaged with the part of the community that I live in that, I don't know, it's hard for me to ignore, like it's like a sizable population of our community that clearly like could use help, and the resources are maybe there but hard to connect people with, and it just seemed like a good way to give something to people in like a tangible, noticeable way.
And this is an interesting perspective because we've got somebody who's been using in the downtown east side and is in recovery, and someone who's never used in the downtown east side and is in the downtown east side helping. So I want to try to grab those two perspectives because, you know, being in the same shoes as Bobby, you know, where I remember being in the downtown east side and you know, if I had a credit card, I can go to any rehab I want to. But if I don't, I kind of have to go sing for my soup and like go through all this bizarre bureaucracy to get a treatment bed. And so there's a big article today in the Vancouver Sun talking about how we failed in the downtown east side because all these promises of recovery-oriented systems of care were never kept. And we're just giving out needles, we're just giving out housing, and we're like you can get Suboxone within an hour. You can get safe supply within an hour. You can get clean needles within 2 minutes. But if you want treatment, like you're going to have to wait. So from a perspective of someone with personal lived experience and a perspective of someone who doesn't have that addiction experience, what do you think of the downtown east side, where we're at today? Like, are we doing good? Are we so like behind where we're causing harm? Like, what are your thoughts, Bobby, and then Ben?
Well, I think like on one level, yeah, I mean, that's certainly true. Like, I mean, my own experience of like getting into like a treatment facility or getting into even housing can sometimes be very challenging, especially if you're sort of, you know, just effectively riding the apocalypse out there in the street and whatever, you know, the whole world on your back. Like, you have to be sort of you know, persistent. The bureaucratic process can take just unreasonable amounts of time and effort. But like with that said, like it seems like at least like the way that we look at it, like there's like something to be said for the notion that you have to kind of, I guess, like, for one, you have to keep people alive, you know, long enough so that those other pieces can fall into place. And many times, you know, I mean, I went to treatment maybe 9 times, I want to say, and never really took. Like every time within like a week, I would be sort of back out at it. The one time that it did eventually kind of work out, like it wasn't with treatment. I went to like a day program, like a day talk sort of thing, and just kind of, because I guess I was ready. But like, but I mean, when you look at like socially, culturally, like we have this epidemic of people overdosing and dying. We have like a sort of like a cultural norm, which in Vancouver is better probably than anywhere else that I've seen in North America. But it's still, in terms of like that stigma, right? That the shame and all that kind of comes that surrounds drug use. That compels people to use alone, that compels people to be reticent to seek out help or to be open about the problems with their family and so on, because of all the shame and all that everything that comes with it. Like, so in that context, it's like, yeah, I mean, you know, like what we do for sure, we hand out syringes. You can get syringes really quickly. You can get safe supply really quickly. But I mean, like, you know, I mean, if that helps keep people alive until the point that they're ready, then I mean, really, that when you're ready to quit, like, I mean, if you're true, and at least that's my experience.
Yeah.
When you're ready to quit, like you quit. You know what I mean? But it's just a matter of when that is.
And Ben, as someone who, you know, is, you know, plopped in there, you know, were you shocked, you know, at the healthcare system's response? Like, you know, if somebody wants to ask you for help, Ben, and they like got your Nutella sandwich, and they're like, you know what, I'm done, Ben.
Yeah.
Like, were you shocked to find out what you have to do?
You know, I wish I could say I was shocked, but I guess, I don't know, maybe I have just somewhat of a cynical view of like sort of healthcare and social support systems that exist. But so I wasn't totally shocked, but it is It is frustrating for sure, because like I've had that conversation multiple times with people where they're like, hey, I need housing, I need to be in recovery, I need detox. And pretty much all I feel equipped to do is be like, okay, well, you can go to this place like tomorrow morning and then try again the next morning and keep bugging them and hopefully they'll sort you out, you know? And like we have various members of Street Saviors Outreach Society who work for different housing places. And I think that kind of gives us a little bit of a backdoor into, you know, we can call them and say, hey, like, do you have housing? If I send this person to your office tomorrow, can you like maybe do something? But I mean, it doesn't make it like, there's nothing guaranteed. There's nothing super efficient about it.
The one thing about the downtown east side, the who you know thing. Darren's got tons of questions. I know he does. I just want to ask you before we move on to Darren. So how do people help you? Like you guys take donations and all that kind of stuff. Let's just get that out of the, you know, before we run out of time. So websites, like how do people, what do you need? Do you need money? Do you need Nutella? What do you need?
Both money and Nutella.
Bobby, you want to take this?
Sure. So our website right now, it's currently just being redeveloped. We're kind of launching a new site that's kind of a sandbox right now. So that's streetsaviors.org. But the way to contact us, both for donations and if you want to be involved, if you want to volunteer, there is a little bit of a backlog in terms of new volunteer intake because of COVID. We're restricting the number of people that, especially from the suburbs, that we're sort of exposing to the community if they're not already like working in some capacity or in the community. But the way to contact us would be through our Facebook group, which is it's just www.facebook.com/Vancouver Street Saviors with a capital V, capital S, capital S. Vancouver Street Saviors. And basically, yeah, I mean, by all means, we welcome any and all donations. The things that we typically spend a lot of money on is in terms of like our perishables is on Nutella. We go through like an ungodly amount of Nutella. Bottled water. We go through cases of bottled water. Juice boxes, small food items, gloves, socks, and then a bunch of other stuff that we sort of source ourselves, like emergency blankets, things of that nature. But I mean, cash is always great too. And any help is appreciated. And like we also welcome all comers. Anybody who really is up for like a 3-hour walk, on maybe a cold night. And who wants to help or wants some connection. I mean, like I say, like some people, their recovery program is sort of heavy on on meetings and counseling, that sort of support. Like I get most of my support in my recovery and connection, and a lot of my meaning and purpose from this organization. So it's sort of like it definitely does as much, if not more, for me personally than what I feel like I'm putting out in the street. Certainly we're doing some good too, but I'm definitely getting something out of it.
It's amazing to me that there's a necessity for the role you guys play. Like you're a group of volunteers that are in a very, just a very bad part of town, for lack of a better word, keeping people alive. Like that's just crazy. That's just crazy. I mean, I want to sit here and be like, thank you guys. I mean, I do mean that. It just seems so crazy to me, and yet, the government tries to pat themselves on the back for the things that they're doing. Like, I mean, you guys are the front line workers, right? I mean, providing a little dignity in people's lives, keeping them alive for a day to make a better choice. Seeing things you probably, well, unless you've been down there, haven't ever seen before. And the flow of traffic, people going to work, people coming from, the Fraser Valley into the downtown for a little shopping. It's those junkies, those wastes of resources, society's perspective, the forgotten ones, right? I'm wondering, Ben, maybe you could explain this if you had a different perspective yourself, from your experience in your life and how that's changed and what what the common person in society that doesn't really understand these individuals, like what they need in their life, what perspective can be added to their life.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that was sort of that I don't know, stigmatized view of people who use and are in addiction and stuff was never really something like a lens I looked at the downtown east side through. You know, like there's people in various parts of my life growing up that like went through addiction that I saw going through those paths. So it wasn't really a super like foreign mysterious bad thing to me. That said, I think like what a lot of people don't realize is that like don't have that kind of exposure, don't have that, I guess, lens to look through, is that, you know, people that are stuck in cycles of addiction and poverty and drug use are often like, there's just so much going on behind the scenes that you can't see when you're driving past them on the way to the mall, and like you have no idea what they've been through and what their parents went through and sort of just like everything that has led up to that point. So I don't know, it's just, you have to always remember that like people might be addicted to drugs, they might be using, they might be throwing trash around in the street, but like below all that, they're also like a human being that's worthy of like respect and care from the community they live in, like regardless of any of that. So
And love, yeah.
Basic human compassion is, I mean, that's what's in all the policies and resources of government ideas. It's missing compassion, and it's the same thing from a societal approach as well. Just you know, a little bit of compassion can go a long way. And you know, I don't expect even the most compassionate individual to be able to throw on a high-vis vest and head down the back alleys doing what you guys do. So again, thank you. You know, like you're doing the work that a lot of people couldn't, even if they wanted to. Yeah, I'm just looking here. It says you guys have a donation drop off on Commercial Drive in East Vancouver. You know, so that we'll post that. We'll post the phone number. You know,
one question before we go. We got literally 2 minutes. If you could change anything, like you're down there all the time, 3-hour walks every day, what would it be like? And you can talk to John Horgan today and say, John, you know, or whoever else that, you know, in the Ministry of Health, you know, if we do this, we'll be one step closer to saving lives. What would it be?
Well,
first thing that go ahead, Bobby.
I mean, the two obvious things that come to mind would be like just in terms of putting a stop to the overdose crisis, to the sort of like extreme variability with the quality of the drugs, etc., kind of stabilizing that. The two things that come to mind would be just like systematic decriminalization and safe supply on a broader expanded level. Like I know that there's projects like Naomi and Salome, which are the injectable heroin. But I mean, you know, if you're undercutting that market element that is incentivized to provide a product which day to day could be, you know, hundreds of times more potent than the previous day, then that kind of takes that out of the picture. And then, you know, and there is something to be said for the notion that if the addict can be taken out of the that constant hustle to have to kind of come up with $100 every day to keep the sky from falling, having to do crime, having to evade the police, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that is like more than a full-time job. So if you can remove that and the person has that sorted and maybe stabilizes and is on the nod for a while or what have you, but it opens up the space in their mind and their psyche for them to think about, okay, well, how do I want to like maybe move forward with my life, or, you know, add things to my life, or kind of get counseling, or start to kind of move in a direction which isn't just perpetually stuck at like preventing the sky from falling. So that would be my bit.
Ben?
Yeah, I mean, safe supply is the first thing that came to my mind too. I think Bobby explained that better than I could have. So, yeah.
All right, you're listening to Talk Recovery Radio. Coming to you live every Thursday here on Facebook, and we just finished talking to Street Saviors Outreach. If you're listening to us on the radio, thanks for listening on Vancouver Co-op Radio, 100.5 FM, 1 week behind schedule. And don't forget, you can catch us on iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, all your favorite streaming devices. Just go to talkrecoveryradio.com. And if you need links to Street Saviors Outreach, you can go to Talk Recovery's Facebook page, and all the links are on today's posts. Thanks for joining us, guys. Darren, always good to see you on Thursdays. Take care, everybody. And thanks for all the work that you do and to all your volunteers. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Take care.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.